All right, guys, welcome back to another pod. This is the One of None podcast. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Andrew Ganong.
And I'm your other host, Dr. Jonah Casella.
And it's great to be back 2 consecutive weeks in a row. We're back into the rhythm of things. So we have another cool episode today, something that's been on our mind a little bit lately. I know I've been pondering this for a while. And the episode today is going to be about pace, kind of. And I'm not talking about running pace, but kind of the pace at which you're doing something. Now, it could relate to running, it could relate to working out, or it could relate to kind of your productive momentum in your career or your lifestyle. So a lot of what we'll be talking about today is when to know how to do a productive pivot, change what's not working, shock the system, if you will, or when to understand that like you're in a really good flow state and to stay in that flow state because of all the productivity that can be yielded from that. But before we dive into that, I think it's an appropriate time to thank you all for listening. Obviously, we appreciate that. We love anyone who listens, even if it's just one person. So, JC, I don't know if you want to say anything before we dive into it, but we're definitely grateful for you also.
Yeah, just again, thank you guys for listening. We hope that you get something out of it, or at least enjoy us talking about random things that are meaningful to us and what we got going on, but hopefully you get something out of it. But thanks for listening. We appreciate it.
I know I got some love on the Pain Cave. I think that resonated well with a lot of people. And I was listening to it again back over on Saturday, and I texted Jen. I was like, that was a solid pod. Because it's like such a relatable topic for a lot of people, at least our friends and people in the exercise world who are
that was a good one. I like that one too.
Yeah, they understand it, so it makes it a lot more fun to hear someone else talk about it, knowing you're going through it too. So, I'll lead off on this. I was on a run on Monday, and it was supposed to be an easy run for me, and I was about 2 miles into the run or 3 miles into the run, and I felt like I was literally floating. And I say that lightly, but like when you're in running and you can get into a state of just, it was euphoric, honestly. And I don't get the runner's high a whole lot. To be honest with you, it's how I rarely get it. More times than I actually do feel it, but I was in a euphoric state for like 3 of those 7 miles, and I was running at like a 7:15, like 7:10 pace, which was like far faster than what I should have been running it. But I was like my heart rate was perfect in terms of it was relatively low for running at that speed. And I just felt so dialed at that moment. And I was thinking to myself as it relates to like lifestyle and everything. And I just didn't, it was working. So I didn't change anything about it. And I think that can be translated really well into a lot of other aspects of your life, whether it's in business, as I alluded to at the beginning of the podcast, when you are in a flow state and you have a lot of productive momentum, don't change that. And I think that a lot of people feel stagnant if they're not constantly doing something different, which is a great thing to have at certain time points, but it's important to have the knowledge and ability to have the oversight to know, all right, whatever's working's working. Don't change it. Don't try and fix it if it ain't broke, And that's a saying for a reason, because there's so much value in that. And when you're in a flow state or you have a lot of momentum, why even get out of that? Just because you feel like you need to change it up. JC, do you feel that way with some of the runs or your lifts or with work?
Yeah, no, I definitely feel the run. I mean, actually in my everyday life too, you get into those good routines, you get good momentum going in your life, and you know, enjoy that. You know that you're in a good routine and you kind of lock into that. I do the same thing when I run. Once I get into, like, my muscles get loose and I get into a comfortable pace and I'm cruising, I will just zone out and go into autopilot. And, you know, just that same sort of thing where you're just not even, you don't really feel yourself, like you're just cruising, thinking about other things. And before you know it, you got a mile or two down, and it's great. Lock into that for sure. Um, but yeah, even just in my daily routine, I get into really good routines where I won't even realize what all that I'm accomplishing almost. Where it's like I look back on it and it's like, wow, that was a really productive day. It went fast. I was cruising through it. You know, it wasn't like I was dreading every bit of it. It was just kind of like a nice, like you said, flowy day. It just kind of, it was just perfect. You know what I mean? So yeah, I agree with that. I love that. Um, those days and weeks and months, if you can keep it rolling like that, and those few miles where you can get away with forgetting what you're doing for a few miles before you come back to and you're like, oh wow, okay, my legs hurt, now what?
Dude, I'm so happy you said that. Like, seriously, that was the exact thought that was going through my head was, and you said it perfectly. Um, you said you don't realize how productive you are or how productive you've been when you're in that state. And I think back to some of the times, and this is a big motivator for me if I think retrospectively at my time in PT school when I had more responsibility than, a lot of other points in my life. In the moment, I think I was in a probably a good flow state because I developed a routine of what day to day looks like with studying and practicals and clinical rotations and stuff. But you look back at that time, you're like, holy crap, I was so productive. I need to get back. I was so hardworking. I need to get back to that. But that's because I was in a state of momentum for like 3 weeks at a time or 4 weeks, and you get into that state where you're like, and that's my reference point now. Now I have a lot of different responsibility now, but I think back to like if I need to start getting in my head about going harder in my work or my work ethic, I think back to that time and I say, I had so much on my plate, but I was so productive. And I really was in a state of like just momentum at that time. And you stated it perfectly by saying that. And it's right. And that's for physical stuff too, where you just are just autopilot and you kind of forget
Yeah,
about where
it's
you're at
important
and what
to,
you're doing.
and you're right, it's important to remember and like reference those times where you were in that state and you were real productive so that you can reach back to that whenever, you know, because life happens, and we'll talk about that too, where you get out of that and things get switched up on you, and then you're trying to get back into that. So it's good to have those points of reference, like you said. And I think it's funny because it even happened to me just like a month ago when I was transitioning from just typical running as I wanted to, lifting as I wanted to a more structured routine with training for the Ironman. I was thinking about, okay, I got to get back into a good routine. And part of me was like dreading that because I realized, wow, I was really doing a lot every day. And I was like, that's going to be a lot. This is going to be a change that is maybe going to suck. I don't really remember. And then once you're back into it for a couple weeks, it's like, oh yeah, we're cruising, we're good now, and you get into that nice flow state. So it's good to have a reference to knowing that one, you can do it and be productive and live a normal life like that, um, and then just be able to reference it. So I liked how you said that. So I'm down for all that. I agree.
I was thinking
And then
about, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
no, because I was gonna kind of step into something different. So go ahead.
Well, I was thinking about you on my run yesterday about Strava. When I would look at your Strava and you were running like sevens. And at the time, we were in opposite positions because you were training for the marathon. I wasn't really training for anything. I was kind of casually just running. And I remember looking at Jonah's Strava, which is like tracks all of our workouts, and you can see distance, you can see pace, you can see everything, all the splits. And I was looking at Jonah and I was like, that dude is speedy right now. And now it seems like we flip flopped again. And now I'm in race condition and you're picking back up training. And because I'm nearing the end of it. I got about 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks before the race.
Yeah,
And
you're
I'm running
coming up.
sevens. Yeah, like I'm running sevens, and now you're entering back into the training phase. And it's funny because you're in a state right now where you're retrospectively thinking about where you were during prep for the Pittsburgh Marathon. Because dude, you were pushing crazy good runs like on a weekly basis, you know?
Hmm.
And now I think ahead because I know once dawn is over, I'm probably gonna step off the gas a little bit. I'm not gonna be running 5 days a week. I'm going to probably focus a little bit more on longer lifts and still run a couple times a week. But I know that my fitness level in terms of running is going to drop. And I'm going to think back like, man, I'm going to look back at my Strava and see I was running 7:15 pace for 7.5 miles. Like, what was I doing? How can I get back to that? And
Yeah.
that's what's so important, because it's a good driver for discipline too, to kind of enter back into um, that phase of training or that phase in your life where you want to be
Yeah.
productive again.
Yeah. I'm just starting to
So,
get back closer to that. I think when I did a run during my lunch yesterday because I had no other time to do it. Because I had a work dinner after work, and I did just 5 miles. It wasn't a long one, but the majority, I think the first mile I did at like an 8, and then maybe the first two were like 8, 7:50, and then the last two I was doing like 7.5s, and that was the fastest that I've done in a while. And I was like, okay, I'm seeing myself progressing closer to where I was, at before already, which is
mhm.
great. Because yeah, when I first started running again after I took like a month off in October and was trying to get back into it in November, I was running like 8:45s, and I was like, oh man, this is gonna be a journey back to back to sevens. But yeah, because the goal is now, what I'm realizing is, we were just talking about this before the pod, is I am not strong on the bike. I'm getting better at the swim, but that's also going to be tough. But I think the bike is going to be a torture. And to get that 5 hour mark, I think that I'm going to have to play catch up with the run to some extent. And so if I can do like 7:15s for the run, that's going to allow me to take to make up a little bit of time off the bike, because that bike is going to be tough, man. 22 to 23
Dude,
miles per hour is going to be tough
so is
for
that
sure. I
run
mean,
too at the end.
oh, the run's gonna suck too, for sure. But I'm so much more comfortable suffering through a run than I am fatiguing through a bike ride. I just don't have enough experience on the bike, but that's a whole different topic. I got 6 months. I just have to remember that. And that's a good point for everybody too, is just to calm down, because I mean, this is a whole other subject, but I remember when I first started running last year at this time, I was doing tens, thinking, how am I ever gonna do nine for 4 hours straight? And then you get to that point where then you're running sevens for miles, before, like you were just saying. And I remember being so uncomfortable running. It was like Bambi learning to walk again. And I'm just at that point now with the bike and the swim, and I get a little bit discouraged because it's like I'm running really strong, but then these two are suffering, and then it makes you panic a little bit. And I just have to pump the brakes and know that it's just going to take time to develop those skills and just be patient.
That's
But anyway,
why that's why
we
nobody
digress
wants
there.
to yeah. That's why nobody wants to like it's so hard for people to pick up like new hobbies because they hate the period of time where it sucks, where they suck at it, and
No,
they don't like the
exactly.
feeling of sucking at something. So they just like whatever, I'm just not going to do this. So it's like playing guitar. I mean, when I first started playing guitar, I sucked, and I still suck a little. I suck pretty bad at guitar, but I can play it. I can play the stuff that I want to, but like no one wants to sit there for hours on end strumming a guitar and finger picking and all these different things. They say there's like a. I'm gonna finish with this, and we can transition to the opposite side of the conversation about when it's good to change things up. But they say that it takes 18 minutes a day to be like the top, like what, 5% or 10% at something. 18 minutes a day for 365 days, and you become like an expert at it. which is like 18 minutes a day. Like if I just play 18 minutes of guitar, of like meaningful, deliberate time playing guitar a day, I'll be an expert at guitar. Like that seems so
Makes
like
sense.
nonchalant, you know? But
Yeah.
it's like if you were to run for 18 minutes a day, you're probably gonna get pretty dang good at running, as long as you
Over a
dose it
year's time,
correctly.
yeah.
But yeah. Anyways,
All right.
let's talk about
Let's
the other side of things, which is when it's important to change things too. Jonah, you were talking before the pod started. Why don't you tap into this because you were making a good point with this and when it's appropriate to change things up.
yeah, once you get into like I'm going to use lifting and endurance as an example because it's an easy example and you can relate this to other parts of your life too. But this is just a basic easy example. Your body is very smart and it gets used to and it gets efficient at the activities that you're doing to burn as little energy as possible. That's the whole point of your cellular function is to be very efficient to save energy at whatever you're doing. And so when you've lifted for a long time and you do the same lifts and workouts all the time, you are going to burn less calories. You're going to break down less muscle, all things held equal than if you were when you were just starting. It's like you make those quicker gains and then you kind of plateau off, right? Because your muscles are getting efficient, you're getting used to that. The same thing with running or when you're just doing one type of workout. Now you're always going to burn calories and you can always improve if you're shocking the system in some way or another. For instance, if you only run 3 miles a day at a 10-minute pace, sure, maybe over a really long period of time, you'll get to be a better and more efficient runner. But unless you throw a threshold workout in there, or you change up your cadence, or you change up the distance and the mileage, you're never going to really shock the system and progress more efficiently and further in that particular thing. And also in relation to just fitness and working out, switching up what you're doing altogether. So we were talking about this. If you were predominantly a weightlifter and you like to spend a lot of time in the gym, shock your system and throw in a sprint workout or a high intensity workout, change things up. What that does to your body is your brain and all your cells are not used to that. And so then you're going to burn more calories. You're going to, break down more muscle and you get the point that I'm making. So there's one side of this that we talked about where it's good to stay in your lane, and there's the other side of this where it's good to shock the system every once in a while and change it up.
Yeah, yeah, and I totally agree and concur with that. And I think this is incredibly applicable to a lot of the stuff that I deal with in the clinic, and what Jonah's talking about is adaptation. Your body adapts to the different types of loads that you put it through. So for any of my fellow PTs out there that listen, there are a couple of y'all. Actually, there's probably a decent amount of y'all. Um, like that's why progressive overload is such an important topic in the space of PT because you need to be constantly loading the muscle or whatever it is continually in a progressive manner, aka increasing the load over time because your body adapts to it. And your body, like Jonah is talking about, is adapting to the load, the quote unquote load, whether it's an external load, whether it's the speed at which you're running something, the pace you're doing, the volume you're doing. And to put it in layman's terms, in college, I, if you know me, you know how much I love squatting. I love squatting heavy. It's been my favorite thing since college. I, Jonah, me, and our buddies would always we would always be doing squatting in our leg workouts, but we were doing different things with it. So we were either doing a high volume day where we would do 10 sets of 10, or we would do, you know, really high weight, low reps, and maybe do some lower volume stuff. Or we would squat with our feet in a wider stance versus a more narrow stance. And we would change up the reps. And then we would internally and externally rotate our legs to hit different aspects of the quads and that's to change it up because if you constantly just do the same load every single time, eventually you're going to adapt and it's no longer going to benefit you. And so Jonah makes a really good point, because that doesn't just apply in fitness and in physical effort, it applies in everything else too. And sometimes, like, just removing yourself for a period of time from the work that you're doing, if you have remained stagnant and you plateau, maybe trying something new, or um, you know, figuring out a way that you can switch up the plan and and do a new route on the game plan is super important. And I know that's something that, as I took on the management position, I've started to really look into. If you can, the definition of crazy is doing the same thing over and over again, and not having a different, and getting the same result every
Expecting.
time, expecting it to be different though. And that's stupidity, honestly. And we fall into that, because it's habit, and you need to be constantly adapting. And whether that's, changing a different route or a different approach or whatever, what have you, I think it's super important. And so there's a honestly a good dichotomy with it. We talked about ways that it's super important to sometimes stay in that productive flow if it's working, or maybe switch it up because it's not working, and find a different game plan. And we talked about this on goals too in our goals podcast. You should be reassessing consistently, and this is an evaluation process where you have to figure out if something's working. If it's not, let's switch it up. If it's continuing to work, then don't try and fix it, because there's nothing to fix. So there's a cool dichotomy that I think people often neglect, and people neglect the evaluation process of it, is reevaluating what's working and what's not working. Do you agree with that, Jonah?
Yeah, I am I fall victim to this too, where I don't take the time to take a look at where I've come from, everything along the way, seeing how I progressed, so then I can bank it for later, so that, whenever I do fall off inevitably or things change and I'm trying to get back into it, then I'm always like, wait, what did I do to get to where I was? And then I'm like thinking, like, is this the type of workout I was doing? Was I doing something different? So it's good that while you're in it to take a second, look at what you're doing, see, okay, I've made progression here. Like, I've been doing this with my running now. Like, I'm really, like, now that I'm coming into a year of it, I can see like what I do that allows me to progress, and I'm kind of banking that. And so developing that understanding, so that when I, you know, come off a training block and then I'm trying to get back on, I can remember, okay, yeah, like I was here because I did these few things. And you kind of just assess along the way, and it helps you later on. Definitely agree with that. And that's definitely something that people miss or don't think about even.
I think, yeah, that's super, such a good point. And I think, to even add to that, is two things. One, having the ability to have a scoped out view and the oversight to be like, okay, like, where am I at and what's working, what's not working, but also being patient too, because I think people are very quick to want to change something if they don't see the results right away, and they don't hang in there long enough to yield what could be a good product, in the long run, if you were to be more patient. And I think we've talked about this on a couple pods already, about the immediate gratification. You have to have patience with some of these things. Some of these things aren't going to happen in 2 days. So if you go to the gym and you're doing a push pull leg type of split, and 3 weeks in you're like, I don't feel like I'm getting anything out of this. Well, dummy, yeah, you're not going to see any results because you haven't been doing it long enough. So have the oversight to be like, all right, I need to stay in the flow, stay patient. 2 months from now, if you're not seeing anything change, then yeah, that's time for
Yeah,
a switch up
that's
of what
exactly
you're
where I'm at
doing.
right now. I'm like a few weeks. I'm actually maybe a month into actually riding, because I started before the 6 month workup. And I mean, I've probably only done 5 or 6 rides on the bike, and I'm still reminding myself that this is gonna be this is gonna take a long time to develop this and get comfortable holding a certain watt and pace for a while. It's gonna be it's gonna be a long time coming for that. And I just have to remind myself constantly to be patient. Yeah. But that's a good
Yeah,
point. Patience is key. Understanding that some things just take time. to build and not to get discouraged, which is easier said than done because I get super discouraged when I'm on the bike and 10 minutes in my quads are burning and I'm slapping my quads. Like, why is this? This shouldn't be happening already. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
You just have to be patient with it, which I'm
Oh,
actually
I
going to
feel that.
finish up my bike workout after this. I got 30 more minutes of suffering.
Suffer well, my friend. But
I will.
I feel like that was a really good uh, total kind of viewpoint on the whole entire topic of when to switch it up, when to keep it the same, productive momentum, and constantly reevaluating the whole process. And I think anyone who's listening to this podcast can absolutely take gems from this because we all are succumbed to it, whether it's physical effort, whether it's an intellectual effort, whether it's an emotional effort, whatever the case is. You have to have the oversight and the viewpoint, the bird's eye view to be able to understand what to do. So that about wraps it up for us, folks. We enjoyed talking about this. Be on the lookout for next week. We will be having some guests come on. I know I say that a lot, but we have a list of guests that we've been accumulating and trying to line up for everyone. So we appreciate y'all listening and look for us on the next pod.
Yeah. Thanks again. We appreciate everything you guys are listening. And if you have any suggestions for anything or questions or whatever, please feel free to reach out to us we're on Instagram. And like we said in other podcasts, we have the One of None Nation on Discord. It's been a little quiet recently, but we're always on it and down to answer any questions, or even if you have topics you want us to talk about, just let us know. We'll be happy to do that. But thanks again. Yeah, that's all we got, and we'll see you next week. Peace.
Peace.